Hey, Math 95 students, this is Gary Parker again. I'm going to go over a brief overview of Chapter 1 here, which is factoring. So take a look at my screen. So, what does it mean to factor? Well, consider 2x times 3x. Sorry, my magic pen is not working well. I tested it just a few minutes ago and it seemed all right. Oh, pen. Maybe if I pick a new color, I might be lucky. All right, so let's try. Seriously? 2x times 3x plus 1. This pen sucks. Go with me, all right? So you learned about this in a previous course. We could distribute the 2x to the 3x, and that's going to give us a 6x squared. And we could distribute the 2x to the 1, which gives us a plus 2x. So going from here to here, that's called distributing. Reversing that and making a note that, hey, this term and this term, they have a common factor of x, and they're also both even, so I could factor out a 2. Finding a common factor allows me to pull that out. So if I divide the 2x out of the 6x squared, 2 goes into 6 3 times, x goes into x squared, leaving an x behind. 2x goes into itself 1 time. So when I go in this direction, that's called factoring. Now, if you pull out a factor so that whatever's inside of the parentheses has nothing in common, then what you pulled out has to be what's called the greatest common factor. And sometimes I look at a polynomial like this, and I'm able to identify right away what the greatest common factor is. Other times I factor it and realize I missed something, and I can pull more out. And that's okay. I don't get things right the first time. I don't expect you guys to either. So again, this idea is called factoring. We're undistributing. You can think about it as that, undistributing. So why bother? Well, factoring is going to allow us to solve equations that we couldn't solve otherwise. So consider the equation x minus 5 equals 0. That's pretty easy to solve. We just add 5 to each side. And we find that x equals 5 is the only viable answer. Come on, Ken. That's supposed to be 5. Now, on the other hand, if we had x squared plus 5x equals 0, this is a lot harder to solve because there's more than one x in there. But if I make a note that these two terms have a common factor, x, leaving behind a factor of x plus 5, now I can solve this by using an idea called the zero product rule. And what the zero product rule says, if you can have an equation where there's 0 on one side and you can put a product on the other side, then you get to break it on the product into easier problems. So one problem would be that x equals 0, and the other problem would be that x plus 5 equals 0. Subtracting 5 from both sides of this equation, I get x equals negative 5, should be another solution. So the zero product rule is pretty powerful. It says if we can get a 0 on one side and a product on the other side, then we get to split the equation up into easier problems. Now, whenever you solve an equation, it's always an educated guess. So we should just double check that this is true. So for x squared plus 5x equals 0, I think x equals 0 is a solution. I think x equals -5 is a solution. So I'm going to check x equals -5. Whenever you substitute something in to check, always put it in parentheses to be safe. And then just do the arithmetic. -5 squared is -5 times -5. That's positive 25. And positive 5 times -5 is a -25. And 25 plus -25 is definitely 0, which is what it was supposed to be. So that answer checks out. So the zero product rule allows us to solve equations we couldn't solve without it. So there are two solutions here. X equals 0, comma, x equals -5. So sometimes we enter solutions in a list. Other times people like to write them out separately. On paper, it doesn't really matter, but on a computer, it can matter. So I just want to show you a computer example similar to this one. So you have some homework. Again, when working on this course, it's always a good idea to start off with the textbook selection and look at some of the examples there. So the zero product property or zero product rule, finding the greatest common factor, factoring and solving equations with these ideas are important. So this goes over what distributing means, what undistributing or factoring means, and how to use that in equations. There's a bunch of good examples here. Check that out. Following the textbook, remember there's always a selection of videos. So this is how things I would do in a regular classroom with the class. And after the videos, everyone goes home and does their homework. If you're skipping out on watching the videos and reading the textbook, you're only getting part of the course. You're not as likely to do as well as if you look at the book and watch the videos and then do the homework. So question number 9 is similar to the one I was just working on. So this one says, let's blow it up. This looks more readable. That might be a little too big. That works. So solve the equation x times x minus 5 equals 0. So screenshot that sucker. Now, considering anytime you have to solve an equation where there's more than one x, you should think, use the zero product rule. So I'm thinking, zero product rule. Sometimes it's called the zero product property. And with that, I want to check, do I have 0 on one side? Check. Do I have a product on one side? Check. So zero product rule says just split it based on the product. So one possibility is x equals 0. The other possibility is x minus 5 equals 0. So in this case, if we add 5 to both sides, we get x equals 5 is the other solution. All right, so back to the online homework. On the homework, you're going to get lots of cues as to what to do. So this one says solve. It didn't say factor, it said solve. So that means you're going to have to tell me x equals. Down below, it also says x equals. So that means I just need to type some numbers in. Next thing to consider, if you click on the answer box, it's going to prompt you on how to type your answer. So here it says enter a list of integer or decimal numbers. Integers are whole numbers and their opposites, like 1 or -5. Decimals would be like 1.5. There's often a more where they give some examples. -4, comma 3, comma 2.5172. Also, you could enter DNE, meaning there's no solution, it does not exist, or sometimes infinity is going to be something that will be in our answers. Okay? In this case, my answers are 0 and 5, and I want to enter them as a list, 0, comma 5. So anytime you click on an answer box, pay attention to the prompt that pops up when you do that. And then submit your answer. Other things to consider. Sometimes if you type things incorrectly, it will prompt you to say, hey, something's wrong. So sometimes extra messages will pop up, and I'll show that in another problem coming up. And on these problems, you get 2 tries on each problem. If you don't get it right after the second try, then you get to try a similar problem with slightly different numbers, and you get to do it again. And you can do that over and over again until you get it right. Other tip, if you use the video to solve the problem, after you get the right answer using the video, it's very important that you try a similar problem without watching the video to make sure you can do it independently. So that's super important too. All right, I'm gonna zoom out for a sec and try a similar one. I think number 16 was exciting. Yeah, that's a good one. So let me get my notebook and a screenshot, and we'll walk through it. So I want to solve this equation. So again, anytime I have more than one x in there, anytime I have a square involved or a cube or something than just x, then I'm thinking use the zero product rule. So the zero product rule, I want to check, is there a zero? Got it. Oops, but I don't have a product yet. So I have to look at that and try and factor it. So on first glance, I might look and say, oh, they have an x in common. And so I can factor out that x. That would leave me a 9x. I'm just freaking out again. Minus 12. And then I ask myself again, is there anything else I can factor? And then it hits me, oh, 3 goes into both of those. So I already have an x out here. I can pull the 3 out too. 3 goes into 9 3 times. 3 goes into 12 4 times. Okay. So now I've factored it completely. There's my product. There's my product. So now I'm ready to use the zero product rule. So again, sometimes people look at these and they get the greatest common factor first shot. Other times they don't. Just kind of depends. I have good days and bad days, so do you. All right, so this says either 3x equals 0. Well, if I divide by 3, x is still 0. So x equals 0 seems to be a solution. Or 3x minus 4 equals 0. So we would add the 4 to the other side. And then divide by 3. And I get x equals 4/3. Now, a lot of us are accustomed to whipping out our calculator. And if we whip out our calculator here, we'll find we're going to get 1.3333. And those 3's go on forever, whether the calculator shows that or not. And that's a problem. To enter that into a computer, I would have to round. And a lot of times when we solve equations, we want exact answers. And here, 4/3 is exact, but this is rounded, okay? So if I want an exact answer, I want the 4/3, not the rounded answer. So pay attention to the question to see if it says, hey, round or give me an exact answer. So let's look back at the question and see what it says. So solve the equation, no prompt yet, but if I click here, it says enter a list of reduced fractions or integers, no mixed numbers. Click more to see what else it says. It just says fractions or mixed numbers. It does not say enter decimals, so I better not do that. So as far as my answers here, I can enter 0 as one of them, comma, and then 4/3 was the other. Usually the order of the answers doesn't matter. So I should be able to type 4/3, comma, 0, and then submit and see what happens. Ooh, no, I better not do that. I don't know if I'm right. Now I could submit and it'll tell me if I'm right, but when you're taking a test, that's not gonna happen. So let's think like we're taking a test here. We should really check to see if this is true. So I'm gonna go back here. Page 5. So now I want to check. X equals 0 and x equals 4/3. So checking for x equals 0 first. That's going to give me 9 times 0 squared minus 12 times 0. And there's nothing wrong with whipping out a calculator on this. That's a good idea. Although some tests in this class you can't use a calculator. So let's see, 0 squared is 0, times 9 is still 0, 0 times 12 is 0. Yep, I got the 0 I wanted. So then I try again for 4/3. So 9 parentheses 4/3 squared minus 12 times 4/3. All right, 4/3 squared, that's 4/3 times 4/3, 16/9 times 9. Multiplying fractions, you don't need a common denominator. Multiplying, you can cross cancel, so the 9's divide out, and I get 16. 12 times 4/3, I look at that as 12 over 1, and I'm multiplying so I can cross cancel. 3 goes into 12 4 times. 4 times 4 is 16 in the denominator, so that's no big deal. Yeah, 16 minus 16 is 0, that checks.
Hey, good.
Another way you can check it is on a calculator. I highly encourage calculators, except on tests you're not supposed to use them. So Google is a calculator. I could just come to my Google search engine and type exactly what I just did. So 9 times parentheses, 4 divided by 3, close parentheses, squared it. So that's a caret symbol, shift 6. Second column, minus 12 times parentheses, 4/3. And I hit enter. Google whips out its calculator for me. Come on, Google. Let's see here, if I zoom in, Google retyped what I typed with some extra parentheses, and it says, yeah, the answer is definitely 0 there. So trying that again here in Google Calculator. So those of you with Android phones, Google Calculator is great. Come on, calculator. Ooh, it doesn't want to work for me today. All right, so I can do that now. Okay, so back to the homework. Let's check to see if we got it right. And I got it right. If I had used the video or the written example, I would want to try a similar problem and see if I can get it right on my own without looking at the written example or watching a video. All right, in closing, big ideas for this particular chapter, so chapter 1, the idea of factoring. Factor just means write it as a product. Product is multiplication. Factoring, finding the greatest common factor, is a big deal. And sometimes we can do that in one shot. Other times it takes us a couple of tries, like I showed earlier. That's okay. Next big idea for the whole chapter is the zero product rule. Sometimes it's called the zero product property. So those are big ideas. So consider, for example, x plus 2 times x minus 3. If this was in an equation, I'm ready to solve it. Why? Well, I have a 0 on one side, right? And I have a product on the other side. So I could break it up into two different problems. X plus 2 equals 0, or x minus 3 equals 0. Subtracting 2 over here tells me x equals negative 2 is one answer. Adding 3 on both sides here tells me x equals 3 is another answer. So if this was factored, n equal to 0, I can solve it. Okay, let's take this a step farther. New page. X plus 2 times x minus 3 can be multiplied out, distributed. X times x is x squared. X times negative 3 is negative 3x. 2 times x is plus 2x. And 2 times negative 3 is negative 6. Middle terms happen to be like, so I get x squared minus 1x minus 6 So if the problem had started off this way, x squared minus 1x minus 6 equals 0, ignore the stuff at the top for a minute, and it said solve, I've got a problem. There's more than one x, one of them is squared. I can't solve this the way it exists now. However, if I realize that there's factors, and I can actually factor it, then I can solve it. So on the previous page, my claim was that x equals -2 is a solution here, or x equals 3 is a solution here. So I'm just going to check this one for now to make sure. Okay, so I'm testing the zero product rule in a slightly more complicated equation than we've seen yet. So plugging in -2, when we substitute, we should use parentheses. So -2 in parentheses squared minus 1 times parentheses -2 minus 6. Order of operations says you should do what's inside parentheses first. Well, there's nothing to do in there, and there's nothing to do in there. So next I do exponents. -2 squared means take -2 times -2. That's 4. Here, I can, in algebra, we can look at subtraction as adding the opposite. So I really have a -1 times a -2, so that's a +2. And then I have a -6 hanging out. With addition and subtraction, you're supposed to do them left to right as you see them. So this gives me 4 plus 2 is 6. -6 gives me 0, and it checks. That's what I was hoping to find. So the goal of this chapter is to get good at factoring so that we can solve equations that are a bit more complicated than we've seen before. Equations that have squares and equations that have cubes in them. Will factoring solve every problem? No, but it solves a lot. And so it's another tool in our tool belt for solving problems in math. So that's it for now. I hope this was useful. Have fun doing your work and get in touch if you need any help. Take care. Do good math.